Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Philanthropy Hour. It is my distinct honor to welcome to the show today Mr. Ryan Honeyman. Welcome, Ryan.
Well, thank you very much.
Ryan is a sustainability consultant, and he has also written the book, the B Corp Handbook, How to Use Business as a Force for Good. In the book, he interviews over 100 current companies that are using B Corps to provide a better understanding of how they work, how they're effective, and how companies can be successful using that. So, Ryan, why don't you explain a little bit about what a B Corp is and also about how you came into this space?
Sure. Well, yeah, I think those dovetail nicely. So I started my consulting business about 3 years ago. And as I was talking to CEOs and business owners about what being sustainable really means, I realized that, sustainability and being green don't sometimes lead to confusion. It doesn't, like, they'll say, okay, it's sustainable, but what does that actually mean in practice? And so what I found with the B Corp assessment was that it's a 0 to 200 point assessment, and any company can take the B impact assessment, which is part of the B Corp assessment, which I'll get into in a little more detail. But it really makes sustainability tangible and measurable and comparable to other companies. So it looks at community, environment, workers, and governance. And so what I found as a sustainability consultant was the B Corp framework really gave me a way to talk about what being socially and environmentally responsible was to people who didn't necessarily know what to do. And so I certified my company as a B Corp a year after I started. And then for the last 2 years, I've really used B Corp as a way to talk about sustainability to other companies. And so, yeah.
And so how does it, you talked about the assessment aspect of it. How does it work in terms of incorporating? Is it just like any other, like a C Corp or an S Corp or an LLC?
Yeah, so there's actually two parts about the B Corp movement, which is somewhat confusing. So the first is there's a certification, kind of like how you would certify organic coffee or organic milk or fair trade coffee. And what that does is a company has to meet rigorous standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. And the goal with that was to say, hey, let's try and certify a whole company so that consumers and customers and suppliers can really say, it's great to have organic coffee, but you don't really know how the workers are being treated in someone who has an organic coffee company. Or it's fair trade, but we don't really know how they interact with their local community. So B Corp certification is actually something that certifies the whole company, which is it's an innovative new thing that hasn't been possible. And then the second piece is the legal form. So they're actually two distinct things. So there's a certification, and then the legal form was created to allow entrepreneurs the freedom to pursue more than just profits when making decisions. So the kind of typical business paradigm is that when you make money and you take on shareholders in your company, you have a duty to provide you have to act in the best interests of your shareholders. And so what happens is social entrepreneurs usually grow their business, and as it gets larger and larger and they take on more shareholders, they feel a pressure to constantly want to maximize profits for their shareholders. And so that leads to kind of the problems we've seen at Wall Street, and where people are just always focused on short-term shareholder value. So the Benefit Corp legal structure, which is similar to a C corporation or LLC or S Corp, just says in the documents that we consider more than just profits when making decisions. And that gives the entrepreneur the freedom to grow their business and take on investors and have them be protected from shareholder lawsuits for not maximizing profits. So, yeah.
Protects them from that culture of greed.
Exactly.
And then are there annual assessments along the way saying, you are still realizing your mission, carrying out what you purported to do?
Yeah, so the B Corp certification you have to recertify every 2 years. And so, companies like Patagonia and Ben & Jerry's and Etsy and Method, so a lot of the really funky, cool companies have become certified B corporations. And every 2 years, there's a reassessment of their score so that, it maintains the integrity of the standard of the B Corp certification. So with the legal form, there's not a requirement to continually assess against that. So that's why a lot of companies have actually become both a benefit corporation legally and a certified B corporation. So Patagonia, for example, in California was the first legally recognized benefit corporation in 2012 when the law was passed. And they also became a certified B corporation. So now they have the freedom to pursue more than just profits as Yvon Chouinard gets older and wants to have a successor to his company. And they have met the kind of every 2 years certified certification process to keep the integrity of their brand.
So let's talk about Patagonia, because that's probably the best known example, correct me if I'm wrong, of a B corporation that is also successful. And what are they doing to carry out the benefit side of it? What is their social mission?
Sure. So Patagonia is really interesting. They're always trying to be innovative, be more transparent. They have something called the Footprint Chronicles, which they'll show their different supplier locations, and they'll show who's there and what wage they're paying people and what their social and environmental practices are of their different factories all over the world, which is rarely done in retail because you often have shady practices and you want to keep your suppliers under wraps in case your competitors want to try and work with your suppliers. So Patagonia is really taking a thought leadership approach, saying this is an open source model. And so what the B Corp assessment did, they scored, when they first took this 0 to 200 point assessment for the B Corp certification, they only scored 106 out of 200, which was interesting because a lot of us think Patagonia is the most green company on the planet. But what they realized is that the B Corp assessment was really looking at extending them beyond their comfort zone, and to say it's not just about chemicals in your fabrics or reducing your carbon output or your energy. It's also about working in your local community, treating your workers with great benefits, and having a governance system that's set up. So it really helped Patagonia become a more complete business because they found that there was a lot of areas that they weren't thinking of and they didn't necessarily think of as sustainable.
And is that helping their bottom line, or do you think it's hurting their profits?
I think the great part about the B Corp certification is it institutes a lot of systems and processes and practices that a lot of companies just don't do. So, for example, a lot of companies have volunteer programs for their workers, but it's not formalized, and so they might have a volunteer day here and there, but what the B Corp assessment does, it says, let's take these informal practices that you do and formalize it in a policy where you're tracking volunteer hours and you're really encouraging employees to be, active in your community. And so it takes informal practices and helps you formalize them, which creates good systems as your company scales and grows larger that, you'll have one of them is charitable giving. A lot of companies just give to charity kind of randomly. But the B Corp assessment rewards you if you have 1% of profits is donated to charity every year as a formal program. It's just kind of, again, looking at taking informal practices and making them more tangible.
So that's interesting. So is charitable giving in a B Corp structure, can it actually be written into the bylaws?
Yeah. So for example, Patagonia. So Yvon Chouinard's 75 years old. He's going to be retiring soon. And he's kind of the thought leader, very forward thinking. So he took the benefit corporation legal structure and said, in our bylaws, I want to donate at least 1% of profits to charity and make that part of our corporate form, which allows him to retire, and whoever takes over next, that's part of the legal requirements of the company. And so B Corps have been very, very, they're 10 times more likely to donate to nonprofits than the average company, because they're rewarded and they're measured against that standard, and they're really encouraged to say long-term value is created by rewarding your consumers, customers, local nonprofits, and to say that creates a solid business. It's not just about the bottom line.
So B Corp's relatively new phenomenon, right? Last 5-10 years?
Yeah. So 2007 is when it first started.
2007. Do you have statistics now on how many companies are incorporating this way?
So it's interesting. So the certification started in 2007, and it's been growing rapidly. There's about 1,200 companies around the world. So there's companies in Mongolia. The largest telecom provider in Afghanistan is a B corporation. There's companies in Kenya. We just got the first South African B Corp last week. Australia, New Zealand, all over Europe. South America has hundreds of B corporations, Canada. So the certification has been growing. There's about 1,200. And in the United States, where the corporate form is more focused, there's actually been 1,300 companies that have chosen to become benefit corporations. So it's interesting that they've only been, the legal form has only been around for a little while, since 2010. But there's actually more companies becoming a benefit corporation than certifying around the world. So it just shows that there's a real desire to incorporate this into your foundational business documents.
What are some good examples? You mentioned, obviously, Patagonia we spoke about. Etsy is another one. And then some of these around the world. What are some of the more effective companies that you've seen?
So one of the big names that just incorporated 2 weeks ago or in October was Ello, the new social network, ELLO. Mm-hmm. So they have been saying, hey, we're going to have an anti-Facebook that has no ads and will never sell your privacy information. And they got a lot of flack initially because Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn all said that when they first started. They'll say, hey, we're not going to have ads. But what happens is 5 years, 10 years down the road, you start to see like, wow, we have a really powerful network. We should just kind of milk these people. So what Ello did in order to differentiate themselves is they incorporated in Delaware as a benefit corporation. And in their bylaws, they said, we legally require ourselves to never sell advertisements and to never sell our users' privacy information. And then they raised $5.5 million in venture capital from venture capitalists who said, we believe this is a great business model and it helps us differentiate from other companies. And so it's like, this is very, very interesting and a hot topic right now. So
they really are holding themselves accountable legally to that. I mean, you talk about Facebook, Twitter, good examples of companies that go public, and then you find yourself in this cycle where you have a board to answer to, you have shareholders to answer to, and it's all about making those quarterly marks, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so in order to combat that with a B Corp is basically saying, there's a better way to doing business.
Right.
And is it still possible? I mean, are they able to generate the same profits as some of those other Fortune 500 companies?
Yeah, so they did some research. So B Lab is a nonprofit in Philadelphia that's kind of curating and starting and encouraging the B Corp movement. And they've been collecting data from the B Corp movement and saying, are these companies really doing better, or are they, is it just a fad? And what they found was that certified B corporations were 63% more likely to survive the recent economic collapse from 2007 to 2009. So, the systems and processes that certified B corporations place into their businesses isn't just to help the environment and society. It's actually a better business model because they're more likely to survive. They're more likely to attract top talent. They're more likely to increase trust from consumers. They're more likely to generate press and media attention about their business. And so it's a huge market differentiator that's actually paying out.
Why is that? Why are they more likely to survive?
Well, I don't know if they did the actual analysis, but some of the reasons was social entrepreneurs are less likely to give up on their business in a down economy. They're not going to just walk away because they're usually very passionate about what they're doing. Again, like if you can attract the best people and you can have deep relationships with your suppliers, when money isn't the only thing that isn't your only bargaining tool, you have a lot more depth and ability to kind of create better relationships and use that as a way to get through hard times into when the economy returns. So,
do you see this as a generational shift? A younger generation that's more passionate about social issues?
Yeah, some recent studies show that millennials represent 50% of the workforce now. So if companies, and millennials, they've also showed millennials don't want work-life balance. That's kind of an old model where they work at a company they don't necessarily love, and then they do fun things in their off time. That's kind of the work-life balance. They want what's called the work-life integration. So they want to do what they love all the time, and work at a company they believe in, and in their off time do what they love. And so what B Corp does is it really helps the millennials who want a purpose. They want the why behind what they do. It helps them figure out, hey, this company is a great company, and we're going to attract as a certified B corporation, you can attract those top millennials to work for your company. And to give you another example, the NYU, Columbia, and Yale schools of business will now forgive the student loans of their MBA students who work for certified B corporations, because traditionally it's been if you work for a nonprofit or a government agency, you can have your student loans forgiven or at least reduced. And so a lot of business schools are saying, we want you to work in these companies that are that are creating that are about more than just money.
So there's incentives in place now to do that as well.
Yeah.
And you find that the millennials are willing to take less money to work for a cause they believe in?
Yeah, like there's a study in the New York Times. The New York Times quoted a study that said millennials would rather work for a company that pays them $40,000 that they believe in than a $100,000 job that they don't believe in, that are not aligned with. And so there's a huge cost. They're willing to cut way down and work with a company they believe in. So, and
obviously you believe in this. What do you hope to get out of this? What's your mission?
I think it's a very powerful and surprisingly bipartisan movement. So, what I've been really searching for is a way to talk to, the whole B Corp concept is that business is very powerful, and whether for good or bad. So it's good in the sense that it can help economic opportunity, it can help lift people out of poverty, and it's bad in that it wiped out $1 trillion in wealth from the recent economic collapse and the Deepwater Horizon. And so in the United States, 78% of GDP is from business. And so what the B Corp movement is saying, let's harness the power of business for good. So let's really incentivize these companies which are creating most of the wealth and also have most of the problems. Let's incentivize them to really use business for good. And so what I've been really finding valuable is that both Republicans and Democrats like this. So Republicans say, hey, it's using empowering the private sector. They always like that, So it hasn't met any resistance from Republicans. And for Democrats, it's pro community, pro environment, pro workers. And so they've had a really strong ability to, reach a lot of companies with this. And, there's politics and, political divide has led to a lot of, there's not much faith in the government. And so using the business as a way to kind of create your own economy and to drive market share there is very appealing to a lot of people.
It's kind of been the history of our country to a degree, is big business versus government and versus the workers. And as you say, business is what drives the economy. It's what drives the country. But as we've seen in the past, corporations are capable of some very evil, very malicious, very cynical actions. And we don't trust the government to be able to hold them accountable. So this new model is saying we are holding ourselves accountable, and we're legally putting ourselves on the line. We are literally holding ourselves accountable.
Right. And you're constantly measuring. So, we humans like to optimize a measurement. The famous saying is what gets measured gets accomplished in business. And so when you're only measuring short-term share price, you're constantly trying to optimize that at the expense of other things. So when you measure your community impact, your worker impact, your governance impact, and your environmental impact, that just adds another metric that a company can say, oh, we're 106, Patagonia is a 106 out of 200, and we're only a 54 out of 200. So why are they better? And then you can look and see how Patagonia scored better on a step-by-step. Oh, they have a community service policy, they have a local purchasing policy, they donate 1% of profits to charity. So if you're a 54, you can actually start to increase your score based on kind of this, competition that isn't just to be the best in the world, but the best for the world. And so
it really is a new paradigm. You're not just judging your company on profits and having the most money. Your scores are different now. You're being scored on how you're affecting the community.
Right. Yeah. And this is the challenge with any sustainable business. You still have to be a good company. You have to be fundamentally solid. And then this social and environmental layer helps you differentiate yourself in a crowded market. So it's important that any company doing this really realize that being sustainable isn't going to make you a good company. You still have to have a good, you have to watch your profits. You have to watch your, treat your employees well. And so it's just a way of saying, if you've met some of these basic areas, here's another way to really enhance and optimize your impact on the world. And here's a community of people, which, if Patagonia talks about B Corps, it's no longer just Patagonia over here just fighting the good fight by themselves. They're part of a community of 1,200 companies in 36 countries. And so it's really a collective movement to use business for good.
Well, the book is called the B Corp Handbook, How to Use Business as a Force for Good. This is sort of the Bible of the B Corp world. Is that safe to say?
Yeah, I think it is, yeah.
What can we expect to read in? I just started it. I've gotten through the first 2 chapters.
Yeah, so it just tells the history of the B Corp movement. I think it's important to know that this didn't come out of nowhere. It kind of builds on the microfinance, the buy local, the kind of clean tech, all these movements. The B Corp movement is standing on the shoulders of all these great advances. And so it's really saying, part of the book is why, the why. Part of it is how. So what are the benefits? What are the 10 biggest benefits? And then how do you do it if you are interested? So it also has a 6-week quick start guide for me that you don't become a certified B corporation or just use the B impact as a way to benchmark their company. Because I think that's important to differentiate is that the B movement, you can become certified if you want, but they also have the free B impact assessment is that 0 to 200 point score. And any company can take it for free, and you're not obligated to become a B Corp. It's just a way to measure what matters and really say, oh, this is how we score on this scale. And so the website is www.bimpactassessment.net, and they have a free tool to measure your performance.
So, I was wondering this. Let's say someone's listening to this interview right now and is a social entrepreneur, and they have a mission that they want to, help school children receive an education. They want to start a company, but is there an issue saying I want to start a nonprofit versus I can start a B Corp, and what kind of factors go into making that decision?
Right. Yeah, I think it really depends on the type of business, and so I would recommend they talk to a corporate attorney who's familiar with benefit corps and the nonprofit structure. One reason that some companies have chosen the benefit corp B Corp path instead of nonprofits is just the ability to not have to rely on grants. Because nonprofits are amazing, but they rely on grants, and so it's hard to scale very rapidly to kind of meet a new challenge. And so with this private sector kind of model, it allows you to make a small profit or a large profit, but you're not as reliant on constantly grant writing. So that's why some people have chosen to do that.
But on the flip side, you do have to be profitable. You have to have a product or a service that people are willing to buy. Exactly.
So that's why it really depends on the type of company that they're starting. But yeah, they can benefitcorp.net. So there's the kind of 3 websites that people should know about is bcorporation.net is the main B Corp certified B Corp website. Then there's benefitcorp.net, which is the legal kind of corporate form website where it's all about what's the difference between a B Corp or a benefit corp and a nonprofit? What's the difference between a benefit corp and an LLC? So it really answers a lot of those questions. And then the third one is the bimpactassessment.net website, where they can measure their performance. So those are the kind of 3 I would recommend.
Excellent, thank you. I will put those resources on the blog, so if you come visit the site, you can find all those links and go check them out. And in that, it explains the steps that it takes in order to incorporate as a benefit corp.
Yes, exactly. Depending on what state they're in, yeah.
And that's how many states now recognize this?
27 states, and with the most important being Delaware, which 63% of the Fortune 500 are incorporated in Delaware. And so once Delaware passed, it frees up a lot of other states to kind of follow suit.
What is the advice that you would give to someone who is thinking about different options, considering a B Corp, not sure if it's right for them, what would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I guess it really, it kind of depends on their market. So the B Corp, what it really does is it gives you access to a community of thought leaders. Uh, a lot of companies who became certified B Corp say, "Oh, I thought I was most interested in the discounts. People get discounts on Salesforce and they get a free QuickBooks. Every year they get a free QuickBooks and they get discounts on products and services. Other people thought it would be, generating press, but almost universally, and I mentioned this in my book, is that companies who become certified B corporations realize that it's the community of leaders is the most powerful part of the B Corp movement, because you have this group of people who are saying we're collectively trying to use business as a force for good, and you can email Patagonia, you can talk to the CEO of Dansko, you can I've been talking to the CEO. I interviewed the CEO of Ben and Jerry's because he's a fellow B Corp. So it's this, you just really have this cool community of support, which helps any entrepreneur amplify the power of their business.
And having that mentorship and the leadership.
Exactly.
Is there a formal association or network or consortium of people in the B Corp space?
So each region, for example, here in the San Francisco Bay Area, we have a networking group that meets every month in San Francisco. We just started a similar group in the East Bay in Oakland, and another one in the North Bay. And we're starting one in the South Bay, the Peninsula, Silicon Valley area in 2015. And so it really helps entrepreneurs who maybe are just starting a business to say, hey, here's an existing community of 20 or 30 people who meet every month to talk about best practice ideas and to kind of share business referrals. And so it just gives you this network immediately, which is very helpful for any entrepreneur. And they have groups in Chicago and Portland and Vancouver and South America. And so it's really expanding beyond just the Bay Area.
That's awesome. So let's just pull out the crystal ball for a second and, 15, 20, 25 years from now, where do you see this movement taking us?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think even the founders of B Lab don't quite know. But what they've realized is that, there's 6 or 7 million businesses in the US. And even if, there's only 1,200 B Corps around the world. So even if there was 100,000 certified B Corps, they've realized that they're not going to change the whole world just by having a bunch of certified B corporations. But what they've really realized is the two tools, the B impact assessment that any company can use. So whether or not Google or Twitter or Facebook actually wants to certify, they can still use this free B impact assessment to benchmark their performance. And once they know where they're at, they'll want to start improving that performance. So it's just a natural human tendency. So they said, why not, we should try and make the B corporation irrelevant. We should just make it a standard business practice that companies can benchmark where they're at. And then this legal form, they want more companies to have in their foundational documents that they should consider more than just profits when making decisions. And so if you have more companies and entrepreneurs and business schools and lawyers talking about, hey, don't just form an LLC or a C Corp if you're going to do a for-profit business, but form a benefit corp and then measure your performance. And as you scale, you'll be way better off and will have a much higher impact than just trying to get a bunch of certified B corporations. So it's kind of, make yourself irrelevant by providing a lot of tools to help the general economy.
Imagine a world where all corporations had that socially conscious built into their structure.
Yeah.
I mean, Mitt Romney famously said during the election that corporations are people, right?
Right.
So if all people had a conscience and they could act in this manner.
Yeah, I thought of a good article would be if corporations are people, let them be B corporations. Be interesting. It's so counterintuitive to think you could have corporations with a conscience. But I think that most people would feel okay if Yvonne Schoenard was making decisions, as a decision maker. And so it's how do you create more Yvonne Schoenards who are business people, but you really know that they're really looking out for everybody because they're constantly trying to improve and be better for the environment and better for society. So I'm not saying that anytime soon we're going to have, corporations suddenly, enlightened and always thinking of donating their Citizens United dollars to, progressive progressive causes, but at least it gives you some sort of hope, like, hey, at least we should really focus on this private sector because they're the elephant in the room. They're creating most of the problems and most of the wealth, so let's really incentivize them to be better.
And as you said before, things are sort of heading that way. I mean, especially when you look at Silicon Valley community, and I mean, really, the whole young generation is thinking socially and about their place in the world.
Right.
So you gotta figure that more leaders are going to emerge.
Right. And if you want to attract those people, the B Corp is a great way to do it. So it's kind of putting out your Batman kind of like logo in the sky, your B, and attract those top millennials.
Besides your own book, is there anything else that you're reading or that you have read that you'd probably recommend for social entrepreneurs out there?
There's a great book by Kyle Westaway, who's one of the Benefit Corp. He helped craft some of the original Benefit Corporation legal frameworks, and he wrote a book called Profit and Purpose. That's a great book, just to kind of, it's not specifically about the B Corp movement, but it's just, again, looking at what are the social entrepreneurship models that are out there, what are the legal models that support those social entrepreneurs. So that's a great book. And then there's a new book called The Impact Investor by Kathy Clark, who's one of the professors at Duke, the Duke University School of Business. And it's all about how do you start investing in the companies that want to create the new economy. So it's not just incentivizing business, but then how do you incentivize large donors and foundations to really create investments that create an impact on society. So
great, thank you very much. Is there any final message, any message that you want to put out there to anyone who's looking into this, or in business in general, and kind of what we can expect and think about?
Yeah. Well, I think the easiest step for anyone is to take the free, so in addition to the larger B Impact Assessment, B Lab just created last month something called the Quick Impact Assessment. So it's at bimpactassessment.net, and it's only 20 minutes instead of the usual 90 minutes or 2 hours. So any company, if they just take 20 minutes and benchmark where they're at, that's the first step to really taking the next step. Because a lot of the motivation and kind of encouraging people I've found is just a little bit theoretical. It's not until they actually benchmark and get like, oh, this is where I am, and here are some steps to improve. That's when they really start to connect how powerful measuring what matters and being part of a global movement can be.
Well, Ryan Honeyman, thank you again for joining us today on the Philanthropy Hour. I encourage everyone to go to the site, take a look at that B Corp assessment, do it for yourself, see what it's about, check out the book, and if you have any more questions, well, we're going to have you back, and you're going to have to answer a round of questions.
Fair enough.
Well, thank you again for joining us, and take care.
Thanks, Greg.